Snow fell like quiet ash from a wounded sky the night she lost the last of her hope. The kind of snow that muffled the world so completely it felt like God himself had turned his back, and she stood at the edge of the bus stop with a single suitcase, fingers numb through torn gloves, breath shaking not just from cold, but from the truth that no one was coming for her. Not tonight, not ever again, because Christmas had arrived and she had nowhere to belong. Her name was Clara Mayfield, and only 6 months earlier she had believed life still held warmth, still held promise, still held a future shaped by shared laughter and simple plans. But then the letter came, thin and cruel, announcing the closure of the textile mill that had fed 3 generations of her family, followed by the hospital bill that arrived after her mother's sudden illness, followed by the quiet funeral attended by more debt than mourners, and finally the eviction, notice taped crookedly to the door of the apartment that smelled like old pine, cleaner and memories. And now here she was on Christmas Eve, watching families pass by with wrapped boxes and flushed faces, hearing bells ring from somewhere distant, each sound cutting deeper than the last, because joy had become something other people were allowed to have while she carried grief like a second spine. She told herself she would just wait for the bus. Take it anywhere cheap, anywhere warm, anywhere that didn't remind her of what she had lost. But as the minutes dragged and the bus never came, her knees buckled and she sat on the bench, tears freezing on her lashes as she whispered apologies to no one in particular, apologizing for being weak, for failing, for still wanting comfort when the world had clearly decided she didn't deserve it. And that was when the truck appeared through the snowfall, old but strong, its headlights cutting a path through the storm like a promise that didn't know it was being made. And it slowed not because it had to, but because the man inside had noticed something broken in the dark and could not bring himself to drive past it. And when he stepped out, boots crunching softly on snow, she didn't look up at first because disappointment had trained her not to expect kindness. But then she heard his voice, low, steady, carrying warmth the way a fire carries light, and he said, "Miss, you shouldn't be sitting out here tonight." And when she finally raised her eyes, she saw a rancher wrapped in a weathered coat, face lined not with cruelty, but with endurance, eyes holding the kind of quiet that comes from surviving long winters alone. And before she could explain or apologize or lie, he knelt in front of her, meeting her at her lowest point, and whispered the words she didn't know she needed to hear, words that slipped past every defense she had built, words that cracked something open inside her chest. "You're not carrying this alone, and if this story is already touching something inside you, if you believe even one person stopping can change everything, stay with us and remember to subscribe. Because stories like this are meant to be shared, not carried in silence." His name was Eli Harper, and he didn't offer pity, didn't ask for explanations, didn't speak the language of rescue the way some men did, because he understood that dignity mattered just as much as survival. So he simply opened the truck door and said there was a heater inside and a place not far from here where the snow didn't get through the walls. And Clara hesitated not because she doubted him, but because hope had hurt her too many times before. Yet something in his stillness, the way he waited without pushing, told her she was safe to choose, and she climbed into the truck, hands trembling as warmth slowly returned to her fingers. And as they drove through roads swallowed by white, he told her about the ranch, about how it had been his father's and his father's before that, about how silence had become both companion and enemy since his wife passed years ago, about how Christmas had turned into just another day of feeding cattle and fixing fences because memories were louder than carols, and she listened, realizing for the first time that strength didn't mean being unbroken. It meant carrying loss without letting it make you cruel. And when they arrived at the ranch, the house glowed softly against the snow like it was breathing, and inside there was coffee already warm, a fire already lit, because Eli lived prepared for storms, whether they came from the sky or the heart. And he gave her a blanket without ceremony, setting it around her shoulders like it belonged there. And as the night deepened, She spoke, slowly at first. Then all at once, words spilling out about her mother. The bills, the fear, the shame of needing help. And he listened without interrupting, without trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. And when she finished, he simply nodded and said, "You can stay through Christmas, not as charity, but as fact, as if that was the most natural thing in the world." And for the first time in months, Clara slept without dreaming of doors closing. And when Christmas morning arrived, it didn't come with gifts or music, but with sunlight spilling across, snow, and the quiet understanding that she had been seen, truly seen. And over the days that followed, she helped where she could, cooked meals, mended clothes, learned the rhythm of the ranch. And slowly, almost without noticing, she felt the weight on her chest grow lighter. Because healing doesn't arrive in miracles. It arrives in shared mornings and unspoken understanding. And if you've ever wondered whether small kindnesses still matter in a loud world, keep listening and don't forget to subscribe. Because these stories remind us why humanity is worth believing in. The snow eventually softened, the sky widened, and Christmas passed into memory. But something permanent had taken root, something neither Clara nor Eli rushed to name, because some things grow best without being watched. And when the new year arrived, Clara didn't feel like a guest anymore. She felt like someone rebuilding, someone allowed to imagine tomorrow without fear. And Eli, who had learned to survive alone, learned instead how much stronger life felt when burdens were spoken aloud, when laughter returned to a house that had only known echoes. And one evening, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset bleed gold into snow, Clara admitted she had been ready to give up that night at the bus stop, that she had believed the world was done with her. And Eli answered with the same quiet certainty he had offered from the beginning, telling her that sometimes God sends a storm not to bury you, but to guide someone else to your location. And she laughed through tears, because hope, she realized, wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady. It was choosing to stay. It was waking up and trying again. And when spring finally arrived, and the ranch breathed green for the first time in years, Clara knew she had found more than shelter. She had found belonging, not because her pain had vanished, but because it had been shared. And as this story closes, remember this. Someone watching right now may feel exactly like Clara did on that frozen bench. And stories like this can be the light they need. So if this touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs hope. And never forget that even on the coldest Christmas night, one voice can change everything by whispering, "You're not carrying this alone."